350.
I don't know that I feel equipped to be at Legacy team.
Legacy should feel like a person who knows about it, and I just don't feel like like a three one side.
Well, hi, Aaron. My name's Peter, also known as Silly. This has been a delight to work with you on our project having to do with justice. Justice, something that extends through time, something we all have to have as part of our legacy.
Right. And so within Legacy, we came up with 3 major tenets, the first of which is purpose. So we identified purpose through the human, this little character with their rocket ship, and the iterations around them expanding, trying to move ourselves forward. The second tenet was generativity. So this idea of all of these arrows in different directions propelling us forward. And then lastly, futurity. So the arrow is pointed up in the direction propelling us onward into the future.
When you start life, you're grounded. You're not quite sure what direction you're going in. It's creative, it's springy, but eventually, as your life unfolds, you take off, you create that sense of purpose into the future, and that's generativity, purpose, and the future. Mm-hmm. We put all those words together in a definition so we can contribute to this discussion about justice. Mm-hmm. The definition of legacy is a future-oriented, purposeful act of generosity. And I want to thank you for contributing to my legacy today.
And thank you very much, Peter. It was good working with you.
Thank you. And your work is intergenerational, right? Mm-hmm. And so how does your work and legacy, how does intergenerational and legacy fit into your exploration of this theme?
So I'm a geriatric neurologist with my wife, a developmental psychologist, created 3 public intergenerational schools in Italy. So we infuse in our entire culture this notion that we are contributing to a larger society, a larger community. We need to have our purpose. We need to be thinking about the future from very early on, 7 generations thinking, to thank our indigenous folks for that expression. And really think about today in the context of where we want those young kids, when they get the opportunity to be elders, they have a world that is just and that they will pass on for future generations after that.
I guess, I have a similar through line in my work as a social worker as well, thinking about how we're going to make the world a better place for future generations, but take care of the generations that are on the planet right now.
And I will say, as a tree doctor who asks human beings, what can we learn about health in trees and forests, let's think about the trees and forests and our sense of justice.
In terms of legacy, there was Jennifer was talking about the importance of recording and honoring and continuing with those things that have been positive movements and policies in Cleveland that have been set aside or are being forgotten.
We are writing on the legacies of people that came before us, the people in history who contributed to Cleveland being the city it is. Legacy is something we pass on to each other and receive from other people.
We had conversations about the ancestral roots and the history that's being captivated in what we're doing now and what we hope to do.
Well, I'm Craig. I'm an economist and I study inequality. My topic today, our topic, I'm stating in for Kristen as well, was inclusion. So
Kristen is a preschool.
Is a preschool teacher, yes. We view it as a necessary precondition for inclusion, for there to be inclusion in order for justice to exist. Otherwise, it's a warped sense at least. So what we came up today was a bit of a triangle, 2 of them actually, as a building block. So our words were institutions, awareness, and access. And the way we view it is we first start with rules, which are going to be our institutions. They provide the rules to the game. But this is going to pair with legacy as well as sometimes those rules aren't great. So first, this is going to make a first subset of people aware of the rules of the game. And then from there, we can build a certain set of people have access. Given these set of people, perhaps we want to change the rules of the game. So we're back actually as to these people who are currently aware are going to rewrite the rules of the game. So institutions are being rebuilt, hopefully better. Over time, that tends to be the case. So now we actually get to a larger subset of people that are aware. And because we have more people that are aware of the rules of the game, more people that are trying to do better, we get to a larger subset of access. So we start at the bottom, and it's this really small subset. When we get to the top, we have this lovely French doors with these two windows bearing fruit in the middle. And then the only other thing I want to point out are these, in awareness, this both involves reflection, and we have them in the pyramid to reflect, like, we need to be aware of the rules of the game, and that's what this is about. But also, there's outside of it, because sometimes we actually have to build from the ground up. So there's an element of self-reflection that we need also outside of the system. So self-reflection within our lives, self-reflection within our relationships, all of that. And that's really going to characterize the inclusion element of justice, at least from this particular vantage.
And inclusion and justice, how do you connect those two?
Well, like I said, like there really isn't justice if not everyone is included. Otherwise, it's just like we're back at that bottom level of institutions. It's one set of rules written to benefit one set of people. Once we have everybody in, then we can rewrite the rules to make sure they're both effective and actual justice. So there's this whole thing by perhaps Aristotle or a whole bunch of other people. It's like sometimes what is just isn't fair. So we're actually in this element of justice right here. And we're trying to move to a sense of like equity for all at the top.
So how would you include people before changing the system?
Oh, so now like we're outside of like this particular space. So like we can go with like history. Sometimes it's like these radical movements of change. There's some people who are going to be within the system who are dissatisfied with it. That's going to be important. Like the only way to actually change the system is to be within it. But when you're outside of it, sometimes it's going to be radical in nature. So we can think about the civil rights movements of the 1960s and through the 70s. Way before, like there were freed slaves who were working with the North to provide some sense of change for them, for the people that still remain. We can think of like other types of movements. I study a lot of like racial inequality. So I'm thinking like first Great Migration, second Great Migration. Like things didn't get better immediately, but over time, both like in the amount of education people were able to acquire because of these decisions that they made and because of money that they would be able to remit back to their families at home. Like we got incremental change. Like sometimes it's not what we want, but we did get better over time. It's also noted that this is going to be precarious. Like these systems always are going to require monitoring. Otherwise, like this can just tip right over. This is more of like important for like today, and I don't want to say society because like we are very much criticized for calling things society, but it's important that like we monitor the systems that we live in. We're living at a big inflection point when it comes to like participation in democracy and the people who govern ourselves overall. So being aware of that is going to be really important looking forward.
Inclusion and legacy, from the standpoint of what was discussed, how would you connect inclusion and legacy?
Originally, one of our words was history. Like it's just like how it's kind of like the whole thing is history here. So we have a legacy of institutions, like they call like we have the legacy of sharecropping, slavery, white primaries in the South, just exclusion, like just largely everywhere. So like, given that is our actual history, like that is our legacy, our question is, how can we do better now? And a certain subset of people that may say like, we should ignore what happened, but it's probably really important that we don't. Like it's going to be really formative in like how we shape better outcomes in the future.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I am a grant maker and an architect. And
Hi, I'm Dorfel. I'm an engineer and I'm making like a PhD study.
so we are here to talk about creativity and how creativity is almost the glue that ties a lot of some of the issues that we've been talking about and we'll be talking about together, because that's a state of being that really allows a lot of problem solving to occur. But you have to get your brain into and collectively a city or a community together to make the changes that they need to do. And we know how Cleveland is a very arts-rich city, and we have a legacy of being a very creative city, whether it's arts or innovation in the last 2 centuries, or in a lot of the policies that have been developed here. So we really looked at what is the state, what is the best place in your mind to be in as we start to look at creativity. So we have like 4 values. that we have identified, which really identifies some of the qualities that you need to be in to be creative.
The four values that we identify are analysis, curiosity, fluidity, and communication. So, for example, this is fluidity because we got like this ups moment and downs moment, and the whole state of creativity is like diverse. We can be like struggling a little bit, and then inspiration comes. And also we got like this analysis and kind of question ourselves about the purpose, what is the goal with this, and
Actually, almost the starting point is curiosity of what is the problem or the issue that needs to be solved. So the first thing you need to do is really wonder, how do you get to the moon? Or how do you tackle a very complex issue like poverty in a city like Cleveland? So first you have to ask the question. Then you have to sort of get background information. So we looked at analysis of how you actually look at whether it's history, whether it's that question about legacy, how you are going to be inclusive in the work that you're doing. So then there is sort of the end product or the creation, if you will, of what it is. We've used art to really show some of the things, whether it is fashion design or architecture or music or painting, and we're in a wonderful museum right now, so that really rings true. But you know, just like we said with the process, sometimes you go forward, sometimes you go backwards, but you really have to have that flexibility as you are refining your idea. So it's really important to use your brain. So that's sort of the central point of how you do that analysis and do that creation. And then most importantly, how do you communicate that idea to the different communities that you're looking to or the different audiences. So it's very important to be able to reach your audience and inspire them by the way that you present your ideas. With the idea of justice, and we've seen a lot of polarity in our civilization right now, our society. And it's very important to use creativity to sort of get past those rigid structures that people believe in. If they start to be creative and look at ways and look at solutions in different ways, sometimes creativity and even art can be used to bridge those differences in society, to talk and come together on solutions that everyone can live with.
And what are the conditions that a city like Cleveland would need to create a more creative society?
I think that in some ways we have to be able to identify, and again, this gets back to the idea of legacy, we have to be able to identify the problems, not automatically jump to assigning blame, but really just looking objectively in different ways and looking at different viewpoints of people and being able to respect those viewpoints. You might not initially agree, but you have to kind of know where other people are coming from and what some of those sticking points are, and then start to look creatively as to how you can solve them.
How do you create that mindset? What do you think are the elements that are needed to have space for creative mindsets?
I think we had talked a little bit about flexibility, but also another F word that we identified is failure. And a vulnerability, but also to be able to know that failing is not a bad thing, and no one should be afraid of failing, because that's just a refinement. If you are an artist or an architect, you continue to refine the idea. So you might come up with a solution, but then after talking to other people or sort of challenging in a collaborative sort of way, you might have to go back. And that's why we're showing these arrows coming up and down and around, because you can go back. So it's not a failure, but it's just that idea we need to refine a little bit more. So again, sort of getting the idea of blame and something is wrong out of the picture, because that's not productive to a creative mindset. In order.
So do you think that like compassionate policies around like mistakes would be something that needs to?
Absolutely. If we've learned anything from going through the last 2 years with the pandemic, it is that we all need to give each other grace. So sometimes you have a good day, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't get to accomplish the things that you woke up wanting to. And in that way, you have to give grace to yourself, but also give grace to other people and understand that, okay, this isn't quite it, but we're going to work together and we're going to get to a different place. Is you have to be in a space to be vulnerable and trust people in order to show that and also to receive it in other people.
Hi, I'm Indira. I live locally, and most people, I go by what people say, they call me the connector, community activist, advocate. I don't know, I help children, seniors, political leaders, nonprofits, what have you. Whoever needs help, if I can help them. So.
My name is Bobby. I am the Community Engagement and Education Coordinator here at MOCA. I'm also an artist and a Cleveland native. So we were focused on connection. So I'm gonna read off my principles, and then Indy is gonna read off her principles, and we'll share what we came up with together. I thought of vulnerability, being very making sense of connection. So being open and vulnerable opens the door to invite connection. And then inclusion, people being included will lead to real connection. And then leading with intention and purpose. So knowing what you're connecting on, kind of like self-reflection, and then what is the outcome of that connection. And then also thinking of justice. So leading with inclusion will then create justice due to all partners and voices being included, and deciding on systems that affect them and creating positive and effective connections across the board.
Then I have for connections is space. Because a lot of times there isn't the space. People want to come together and the space isn't available, which again leads back to access or accessibility. Also connecting with experiences, whether it's commonality or differences. The ability to connect could be anything from language to physical mobility, even being able to hear and listen, because I've often said that people sometimes listen but they don't hear, or they don't listen or hear. And that gets us in a lot of trouble. Vibration, energy, intuitive, and words and meaning kind of all run together for me. And then having an understanding in that connection, because to connect, you have to be able to kind of understand each other or try to come to some type of clear communication.
So we found a lot of similarities and connections with our principles. So we came up with purpose, so self-reflection and intuitive, and then vulnerability, so able to be open, feeling like us having a safe space, and then commonality and differences, and then also talking about experiences, and then inclusion, so connection and accessibility. So people being included, having access to each other and opportunity, that's equal resources, being included in conversations, spaces, listened to and heard, learning with purpose, and being open and vulnerable.
You come to those concepts visually, how you visualize that?
It's actually, can you show yours? She and I sat down and we drew our pictures, but it was interesting how we both came up with
the same
almost the exact same thing. She had a circle here, and I had a circle. Hers was about full circle, like I guess the 360.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you can explain more what you meant, but at the same time, I came up with the circle of us connecting as community and as a globe. And then here, where she has connecting, like, well, you explained that part.
Coming from two different viewpoints and meeting in the middle.
And then right here, I had two connecting thoughts and brains, and then she has the hands, and I couldn't do the hands. So mine looks like fist pumps, but we were like, oh my gosh. And then even sitting here on a bench or heart to heart, it was like we came up with the exact same things, basically. As we were putting this together, and you can help share with this, the concepts that just kept rolling out. One is the mirror being a self-reflection, and then also seeing each other. And there's mirrors actually in the eyes.
Yeah, and we thought of the mask like looking past the surface and looking like deeper into the soul and seeing ourselves and each other.
Okay. And then these were a couple of things. One is your stages as a young person, then middle age, and then getting older, but also going back to that intergenerational, like whether it was the school that was discussed or just the fact that bringing children, teens, adults, and seniors together because they all have something they can share and give to each other.
And then with the yarn, also people coming from different viewpoints, but still having some sort of commonality and understanding from each other.
And then also the natural of the wood was like the nature in yourself. And that leads back to when she was talking about being vulnerable, but also just being yourself, but then also connecting to nature. And naturally we are connected. So there, I don't see the separation of us. We had a little bit of gold medal in here with the eyes that was supposed to kind of represent royalty and, seeing the richness in each other and ourselves. So I think that.
And I think the heart also kind of goes to that too. So purpose and being intuitive with what you're connecting on as well. What will be the outcome of that vulnerability?
And then also the heart to heart when you're having the conversations.
How is it connected to justice?
Wow. Well, we can't have justice if we don't have any peace. And we can't have peace if we can't talk to each other. And we can't make positive changes, and we can't make, decisions on a high level, a local level, or anything else if we are not connecting to each other.
I would say the same thing, and going back to us understanding that even though if we have differences and being vulnerable, we have to have those initial conversations and connect before we go to a stage of justice.
And then how does that translate between government and society?
That's a big one. Yeah, I think that's an issue we're looking at seriously dead in the face right now, because all over the globe there's an uprising. I mean, we're not asleep, and something's been brewing, not just in the last couple of years, but it's been brewing a while. And we as societies, not just ours, but everywhere, if you really look back in history, I could say go back 5,000 years, there's been an issue with power and control and, who thinks who has rights over whoever else, because I think we have some people on the planet who feel like they're superior, like past the heavens or something, and just we want to make decisions for all of you. And I'm like, no, there's a serious movement and one that needs to happen. And we're I believe at a point in time where we don't have time to play around with, these little teeny things that you think bother you, whether it's in your home or in your neighborhood or in your apartment building or parking spaces or whatever it is. We need to get all past that, because right now as a collective, we need to realize that our rights, a lot of them have been taken away. And if we don't get it together and start talking and moving and building more, I know a lot of people are doing it, but more so, and understanding that if we are voting or whatever we're doing, and we're putting people in positions that we've been a little bit too distant, checking the box is not enough to make sure that the people who are in those positions really are affecting, reflecting us, making good decisions, and not just checking off because somebody's family's been in office 20 years and you recognize a name. You can't shake my hand today and smile and think, oh yeah, no, I got to know you, about you, what you're doing, how do you affect us, and not just locally, because even when our society is made so busy now that even back, I said, when did sports start overlapping each other? Like when you're looking at the Super Bowls and you're at the World Series and all that, I always said, our societies just keep being distracted all the time. And I'm like, when is everybody putting the brakes on? Because it's go, 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 and then stack, stack, stack. When are we stopping and going, hey, what's going on in places that we're not at that are affecting us, where we're being kind of kept too busy? So, I think not that this being at home for 2 years, 2.5 years, and all this stuff that we went through, there's a lot of disadvantages to it, but there was also an advantage where we were able to start connecting to each other more online, in person, realizing what really does matter. And some people think, okay, we're going back to work, doing whatever. We don't have time for that anymore. We really go to.
So even in recent recent history, there's legacy that should be explored and included and honored.
Yeah. Like we're being included in these conversations that are affecting the people in the community or different generations. Like how is everybody's voices being included in those
Who else?
policies?
Who else do you think needs to do this kind of work?
I think everybody. I really do. But, students in school, and not just college students, because a lot of times, by the time they get to college, they're in classes and they're trying to do what they got to do to please whoever and learn whatever and come out. But I think a lot of people don't listen to children. I've told 92-year-olds, there's some 2-year-olds that can teach you something. It goes both ways.
So this definition of justice, this goes for everyone. Who do you think? Who would you like this information to reach, and who would you be curious to hear from?
For me, I would say definitely elders. A lot of them are available. They have space. They have time. They've seen a lot. They can offer a lot. And at the same time, I'm really about young people, because the younger they are, the less they know about what society and the world has been. And I think that gives them a serious disadvantage. And I think it's our job to support and protect and guide them if we know what we're talking about and doing. And we need to mix in, like we were saying, intergenerational, even those circles. Because I think the 2-year-olds, maybe not a lot of adult stuff, but I listen, even a 3-year-old, I said, if they know how to make a mess, they know how to clean up. You gotta teach them, give them skills and things like that.
We need to choose one government agency that's the one that needs fixing the most. Which one would it be?
Like the mayor, I think, will be.
The mayor's office needs the most, that's the most pressing need to change.
It's a lot of institutions and a lot of systems that need to change, but I feel like maybe talking to the mayor's office could be a jumping off point for the other institutions to get.
I guess for conversations about Cleveland, the mayor's office makes a lot of sense. I think unfortunately Ohio is a pretty hard state to live in, so I would love for this stuff to get to a statewide level. We're just been in a bad place for a while and it's not really changing, and so I think there need to be more retrospective and reflective conversations done at a statewide policy level.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming, for
Thanks for the
participating,
experience.
for your genius, for everything that you gave today. So thank you. Thanks again.